Hello everybody. So it's a lazy afternoon here and I'm cleaning around the house, and I discovered I have all these partial rolls of filament that are too small for any given project I have coming up. So I figure I'll take this opportunity to demonstrate how I join partial rolls of filament together using a filament splicer. So let's talk about the tool itself. This is a filament connector I purchased on Amazon about 2 years ago. And basically it's a glorified quick grip clamp with a heated element right on the inside, the little silver tip seen here, that heats up to weld to the tip of 2 rolls of filament together. Now there is no temperature control on this device. It is on or off and just powered by your normal wall outlet. Now in practice, when I used this, I found that heat seeped into the rest of the filament and deformed and bent up. So in order to make this tool useful, I had to design a 3D printed cooling system to hold the filament straight and provide air over the filament not in the heating element, much like how the hot end of a 3D printer extruder works. Now to keep everything tidy and powered, I just plugged the end of both devices into a 3-way splitter and zip tied the cables. So one is the power supply for the joiner, and the other is a 12-volt power supply to run the fan. So the fan runs whenever the unit is plugged in. Alright, let's go ahead and join 2 rolls of filament together. Now the color of the 2 rolls doesn't matter as long as the type of filament we're joining is the same. In this case, we're splicing 2 rolls of PLA Plus together, which is my go-to for most projects. We'll start by making sure the joiner is off so that we don't melt the plastic too early. Now for a good weld, we need to square the end of the filaments before we put them in the joiner. Now most modern printers will leave the end square, but if you have to, you can also use snips to ensure the end is flat. We'll center the edge of the first roll in the heating element and clamp it, and then we'll square the end of the second roll and without opening the clamp, push it into the joiner. Now I normally go by feel to tell when the 2 ends are touching, but you could also mark the filament with a Sharpie beforehand to make sure both ends are touching and centered in the heating element. You just need to experiment. Once both ends are locked into the joiner, the tool is set in the cooling block and we are ready to weld the filament together. Since we are joining PLA or PLA Plus in this case, the timer is set for 5 minutes and then we turn the joiner on and start the timer. Now if this was ABS, the timer would be set for 10 minutes, which I'm pretty sure would work for PETG as well, but I haven't worked with that filament for several years now. While we speed up the footage, I will mention that the product itself recommends 2 minutes and 30 seconds to fuse the filament. This didn't work for me and I had to increase that to 5 minutes with the PLA Plus. You will have to test this on your own with the filament you use. So after the timer winds down to 0, we will turn the heater off, reset the timer to another 5 minutes, and then we'll let the filament sit and cool down for that time. In the past, I was a little too cautious and would let this cool off for 10 minutes, but I found even at room temperature, 5 minutes is more than enough to cool down the filament. Alright, and now it's time to get the filament out of the joiner. Now to open it up, you just squeeze it like you would any hand clamp, and you'll see the 2 ends are fused together. Now sometimes you'll get lucky and it will just pop right out, but most of the time it's going to be stuck to the bottom part of the clamp. So I'll turn the clamp back on to restart the heater element, and I'll just gently tug until it's warm enough to pop out, and you'll see the sun release from the clamp. I try to keep it in the window for a few seconds to cool any plastic back down to avoid a sharp bend in the plastic. Once I'm confident, I lift it up, and now the spools are permanently joined together. So now with our filament joined, we need to start storing. So we'll make sure the tool's off if we had to heat it up to get the filament out. And then we're going to start the process of winding one spool onto the other. Now in recent weeks, the algorithm has been showing me some unique tools to respool filaments. I'm not using any of those. I have a pull-up bar in my house that works really well for this, so I just put one on one of the bars and spool it by hand manually. Alright, with the 2 rolls of filament joined, we can go ahead and continue building on. So same process as before, we want to start with a square edge on the first roll of filament. Now you see I have a bend here because it was the end of the previous spool. So I'm going to snip that off with the cutters to make sure I have a square end within the tool. I'm going to line it up with the heating element, and once I'm satisfied I'm centered, I'm going to take the second roll of filament, square the end as well, and place it into the tool. Again, I'm going by feel to make sure when they do contact. If you want to, use Sharpie to make sure you have them centered. Once they're connected, they go down into the tool for the cooling, and then we start our 5-minute cycle of heating and then our 5-minute cycle of cooling. And we can continue this process of welding, cooling, and spooling until we end up with a usable roll of filament, something like this. Now here's the roll of filament we assembled from all the partials. So we've saved the space because we don't have to empty spools. And if you were just doing this because you had a large project like a battle droid, you would have basically a new spool built from all the partials in the same color. Now here we have a rainbow effect, which we're going to use for paint examples. So the game plan was I was going to take that roll of filament and print a palisman for a future tutorial and have it be a whole rainbow of colors. But the results were pretty less than exciting. We have Luce's palisman with 2 colors and Flapjack with 2 colors. So to get something with a rainbow effect to look cool in this video, we're gonna take some more PLA Plus I have left over, and we're gonna just make an example and print Flapjack's wing and have it actually have multiple layer lines. And so the process begins. To get a good rainbow print, we join multiple spools together one by one and roll a little bit just onto the master spool, which I believe I start with the yellow one in this video. So we just keep going until we have a little bit of color on each one, and then eventually we're going to end up with this. Alright, so now we have our assembled roll of filament. Multiple colors, short layers, so we're guaranteed to get our rainbow print. So you'll see here I loaded the spool on the Bamboo P1S. I am not using the AMS system, so we will print just from this one spool of filament. Now earlier I said we would be printing Flapjack's wing. I figured that was going to be too small to give us a good rainbow print, so I decided to go ahead and print waffles instead. So what you see here is a time lapse from the P1S camera. So again, this is all printed just from that spool we spliced together. There's no filament reloading and there's no AMS being used. And here's the printed waffles. Now you can see where all the different filaments we spliced together start and end. I do want to stress that other than the color, there is no difference. The whole thing is printed in PLA Plus, and once we get the first layer of filler primer on, you won't even be able to tell the filament is from different rolls. Alright, so I hope you all found this information helpful. Now I will be adding links in the description for the joining tool as well as the files for the cooling attachment. Now after I shot the video, I did modify the files to use screws rather than the heat set inserts in my original design, so you don't have to buy extra parts. You'll just need to acquire the screws and a 60mm fan along with a power supply for the fan. On a personal note, I want to say thank you all for joining me for my first edited tutorial video. Learning to shoot and edit is a new adventure for me, and I hope that sharing the lessons I've learned over the years will help you with your prop, costume, or robot journey. So feel free to comment with what you would love to learn, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.